Good afternoon, everybody. It is January 25th of 2024. I am Will Scouch. Welcome to Scouching Live. It's wonderful to see you all again. We've got a wonderful, wonderful show ahead. But I am, of course, as always, joined by producer AJ. AJ, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Very
Doing good.
good.
As usual, doing good. Good to hear, good times. Before we get into what we're going to get into today, I just want to run through our sponsors of the show. So we're brought to you by Fanatics. You can use our affiliate link below or scan the QR code in the video window to provide a small kickback to the show on anything you buy in the store. We're also brought to you by Puck Preps, which is a place for all of your NCAA prospect needs as well as your CHL entry draft prospect needs over there. So Sam, my co-host, who is currently living it up in Cuba, and I cover the 2006 age group. So I'll have my CHL top prospects game report going up there probably in the next couple of days. We're also brought to you by Fractal Hockey Consulting, which is my business for hand-tracked targeted player analysis and recruitment packages focused on Europe, the NCAA, and beyond. And of course, this website, Scouching.ca. You can subscribe to Scouching for exclusive access to innovative data tools with unparalleled insights into draft prospects and players making their mark in the NHL and more. So we've got a great show, as always, obviously. I mean, I'm a little biased, but, it's going to be a great show. So we're going to talk a bit about potential NHL expansion. We're going to have a little discussion. I'm sure we're going to agree 100% on everything we say about where the NHL should expand, but we're going to talk about Utah a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of NHL teams that are maybe, coming back to earth or struggling, or should I say actually cooling down, maybe, for real.
I think cooling down is fair.
Actually cooling down for real this time. We're going to talk, obviously, a little bit about the CHL Top Prospects game. And I also do want to say that all Scouching.ca subscribers, regardless of tier, have access to my rankings. So if you want to see them and see the write-up, those are available behind the paywall, but they will be made public next week. And Monday night, we're going to do a show that should rival that of the almighty Bob McKenzie's draft ranking show. So we're going to go through that on Monday night and do a big old prospect-heavy show, and it's going to be a great time. So let's dive right in. So there was news earlier this week that Smith Entertainment Group, owned by the owner or run by the owners of the Utah Jazz, they have gone to the NHL to initiate an expansion process to bring a team to Salt Lake City. Now, personally, I'm a little bit, I'm not surprised. Obviously, this is a guy who offered the Arizona Coyotes a spot in their arena where the Utah Jazz play in Salt Lake City. But Arizona seems to want to figure things out on their own. And, we can talk a little bit. We can start chatting, I guess, AJ, about the validity of Utah as a potential destination for hockey. I'll say my piece, and then we can get into it. But for me, I mean, I get it. This guy is trying to make Salt Lake City clearly more of a destination. In the press release they put out, they specifically mention the Olympic bid, that they're trying to bring the Olympics back to Salt Lake City, which, I mean, all evidence should point to the fact that would go quite well, considering all the facilities are already there from last time mostly, and those Olympics went extremely well from when I was a young boy. But in any case, it mentions a lot about all the different Salt Lake City organizations they own and operate, and that they want to bring another NHL team to it to add to that sort of family of teams. And of course, why wouldn't you, right? The NHL is, coming along. They mentioned that the Utah economy and population is growing very, very quickly. And what I came away, and AJ, you saw me write this in the notes, but I came away sort of sitting there going, clearly this guy's trying to make Salt Lake City like Mormon Vegas, trying to make Salt Lake City a sports destination like Vegas. The NHL was kind of the first major market to Vegas, and now it seems like there's a little bit of interest. The Raiders moved to Vegas. There's NBA expansion interest in Vegas.
So there's moving to Vegas.
Yeah, the Oakland Athletics are moving to Vegas. So it seems like Salt Lake City is trying to sort of put themselves on the map this way. I've actually been to Salt Lake City. It was a long time ago, but I actually really liked it there. It's weird. It's a strange place, but it's really fun. I had a lot of fun there. And getting used to the dynamics of a place like Utah and Salt Lake City is a little bit different, but over time, I think Utah is slowly morphing into what it's less of what it's stereotyped to be over time. But I mean, I would understand why Utah would be a destination, especially with an owner who is very, really, really wants to make this happen. And I think that that's a very important part. It's not just running a business. It's like you want to bring something to the city that people can rally around. So for me, I get it, but I don't know, AJ, I think you and I both agree that there's probably other places that might be a higher priority, but what are your thoughts on Utah here?
I mean, if they got the money to do it and it's a growing city, then have at it. Like, the NHL is just going to follow the money, and I also trust their judgment at what's going to sell better than what I know, even though the NHL has not the greatest record of doing that. It's just I'm not an expert that way. Mm-hmm. But, like, if it were me, where I'd be looking is Houston. It's huge. I think it's the 7th biggest metropolitan area in North America, and it doesn't have a hockey team. Sure, you've got the Dallas Stars, and they're in I think an even larger metropolitan area. But Texas is huge, man.
Yeah.
The whole stereotype about everything being bigger in Texas kind of is true at some level, especially when, like, there's definitely massive expansion avenues in terms of bringing a team to Houston. Like, I think that would be awesome. And I'd prefer that over Salt Lake City, at least for now.
So I've never been to Houston personally. In terms of metropolitan areas that don't have a hockey team, it is the largest. I'm pretty sure it's like by far the largest metropolitan area without an NHL team.
In
Atlanta's up there too.
It's not Mexico City.
or like Tokyo. You're not going to put an NHL team in Tokyo. But I feel like the problem with Houston is that it is enormous. Like, geographically speaking, like, there's enough people to probably support a team. But I mean, again, I've never been, but from what I've read about why there isn't a team in Houston, a big reason is because there's concern with, like, how few hockey fans there would be in that area interspersed around the whole gigantic metropolitan area. So, like, where do you put the arena? Like, where do you there's like no public transit in Houston. Like, in Vegas, at least there's public transit. So I get it. I think the biggest city that doesn't have one is Houston. But it's interesting to think about the secondary reasons why there might not be one there. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be one.
No, I actually fair. And it could also siphon away from the Dallas Stars too, right? Like,
yeah,
that might be covering the base enough. It's just like, I think a team in Houston would also still attract a lot of fans. But I'll let you go.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think at the end of the day it would work. It's just I think it's a little more complicated because it's so big and it's so sparsely, for a city, it's like very sparsely populated. It's massive geographically, but there's also a ton of people there. I actually, on my list, I put down Austin. So, like, the neighbor of Houston. It's interesting. There's a lot of U.S. cities that are actually shrinking. People are moving out of big cities in the States, and that includes Houston. They're moving to, like, San Antonio next door, and they're moving to Austin. They're moving to Phoenix. They're moving out of these big giant cities. And with Austin, like, we just saw Seattle come in. They kind of have this, Austin seems to be like the Seattle of the South in a way, or like the Portland of the South. I also put Portland on my list, but that's a very small city relative to most NHL markets. But, like, with Austin, you could kind of replicate the sort of marketing strategy and branding around, well, not literally like the team branding, but the approach that they're taking and, like, how they're attracting fans. I feel like something similar would work in Austin. I think there's more of a clear identifying sort of culture there that, could bring a lot of success for the NHL. And I don't think Austin has any professional sports teams. As far as I can recall, they don't Yeah, I don't think they have any. People probably just go to the Spurs games or the Rockets for basketball, and football has the Texans and the Cowboys, but there's nothing in Austin. So I don't know. That was the place that came to mind for me.
Yeah.
But they would need to build an arena there. But the two cities that actually have arenas that are bigger than the smallest NHL arenas are Cleveland and Portland. Cleveland has where the Monsters play, which is an 18,000 seat arena, and Portland is at 16,000, I think, where the Winterhawks play.
Team.
Austin has an MLS team. So I don't know what the success of that MLS team has been, but that's a city that I kind of was scrolling through of like, where's growing, where are things in those cities, and Austin popped up.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because if Houston has a logistical problem of actually getting fans to games and building an arena, then because you mentioned that it's really not that far from Austin, correct?
Yep. I mean, not far, but it's Texas, right? Everything's bigger in Texas.
That is true. But that could cover that sort of area, because you have the Dallas-Fort Worth area that's got the Stars, and that's a pretty massive metropolitan area. And then if you can get Austin, Houston, even though they're not really together, but they're close enough where you could get a team to cover that market, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and like another thing too, just to put it in perspective a little bit. So people complain a lot about the Arizona Coyotes. Like Phoenix is also one of the largest metropolitan areas in the United States. Like if Phoenix lost their team, they would also be like Houston. It's smaller, but it's a similar-ish population. And a big problem with Arizona or Phoenix is like many cities this day and age is they're not built to be dense. They're built to sprawl. And the metropolitan area, like in Phoenix-ish, is not circumnavigated, but it's encompassed by a highway that is around like a diameter of maybe 20, 25 kilometers, something like that. So for Americans, like 17 miles or so. And in Houston, it's the exact same. Like they have rings of highways, and the sort of metropolitan area seems to be encompassed by about 25 kilometers. So if you have a 25 kilometer diameter square to put an arena, like you're kind of going to be boxing out a large geographical area like they do in Phoenix, right? They put the arena in Glendale, and now they can't find anywhere in the area to agree that that's where they want to put the arena, right? Multiple suburbs of Phoenix have said no. So, and if you don't have an arena in a good location, you're kind of dead in the water already. Like, look at what the Ottawa Senators are dealing with, So, and you kind of only get like a couple of cracks at building an arena before people kind of just go, I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. I mean, I know you're gonna shoot me in the head when I say this, but
oh no,
I mean, you seem to be extraordinarily against the idea of another team in the Greater Toronto area.
Yes,
but
why?
Because it would make a shite load of money.
But it doesn't do anything to grow the game, and that's what the NHL's trying to do.
But what are you grow the game
Get
how?
Disgruntled
though?
Leafs fans to just jump ship, like expand into new markets.
But
Toronto is not a new market. It's a market that is the biggest in the NHL, at least according to Forbes this year. Changes between Toronto and the New York Rangers. And even the New York Rangers you have the Islanders there and the Devils there. So, like, they have some of their share of the pie kind of taken away from them, but they're still by far the biggest of those three teams. We have a team in Toronto. Why do we need another one? There are other places that should have it. Like
because
Atlanta.
The NHL likes
Atlanta
money.
should get another team. Because that team was doomed from the start, all right? They were so bad for so many years. And they just didn't sell because of how terrible the team was. They didn't win one playoff series in their...
No, they did not.
In their, 11-year time in Atlanta? And now the Jets have been in the league longer than the Thrashers were.
Yep. Which is crazy, because I remember when the Thrashers were new, which, yeah. I don't know. I guess it's like, what do you mean by expanding the league, right? Like, because a team in the GTA, it would print money. Like,
Sure,
it would print money. It would print money,
but it
and
would siphon money from the Leafs.
oh no, so many people in the NHL fandom is going to be so sad that it's going to siphon
I
money
will
from the
be.
Leafs.
I will be
Oh
sad. I
no,
like seeing the Leafs atop the Forbes list.
not the poor Toronto Maple
No, but
Leafs.
it's just
Oh
like it
no.
doesn't. More than anything, it doesn't grow the game, and that's my problem.
I mean, but
You just expand.
but
Like it's why I don't want any expansion teams in Canada, and I know that's unpopular. But like, what are we gonna do? This can't. Canada loves hockey. We don't need more teams in Canada to expand the base of support for hockey. It's like a institution in our country. Hockey.
yeah.
In the
So
States we're trying to grow it. We're trying to get it to a level where it's bigger than it already is, where people don't call it like a fake sport because that's a
so
thing.
so how, like, but also like growing the sport is also a global thing. It's not just put a team in a place so that people there like hockey. Like, it's like, how does a team in Houston, that's a, I would say, a bit of a risk, how does that help, say, gaining more fans in, Sweden or whatever? I mean, those are small markets. Sweden, I think, has fewer people in it than Houston. But I don't know. I like, the way I see it too is like the NHL is falling behind, like, revenue wise, all the other professional leagues in North America, and they have been for 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's because the teams that they're trying to build hockey in are not making nearly as much as the teams up at the top, which, fair enough, right? Like, a lot of leagues are like that. But how do you close that gap, right? Like, how do you change
Marketing
that
has
a
been,
little
I
bit?
think, the biggest problem with the NHL. It's like there's global reach for like the NBA because they've got a
Right.
lot of European superstars that are now in the league, like Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic, even Pascal Siakam, who's from, I think he's from Cameroon.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Like they've got global interest in the game, and basketball is just so much easier to play anywhere. You
Yep.
need you need an ice rink to play
Yeah, like, I
hockey,
mean,
and you
if
need stupid expensive equipment. It's just got a natural disadvantage because of all the steps that have to be taken and all the requirements that people need in order
yeah,
to actually play the game. Like that's a big limiting factor, I think.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think like that touches on to me, a more interesting discussion of like, how do you actually get more people playing hockey in 2024? And like, I was on a social media platform the other night, swiping through short form videos, and I was sitting with the better half on the couch, and I got to old highlights from Roller Hockey International. It was a Vancouver Voodoo game, and and if you don't know what Roller Hockey International was, it was a it was a roller hockey league that ran in the summertime for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And the first couple of years were actually really, really successful, especially in places like California, where the Mighty Ducks were brand new. The Anaheim Bullfrogs, I believe, were the team that were there. And that, to me, it's more accessible. Like, the maintenance on a roller hockey rink is significantly lower because there's no ice. The gear, you don't wear as much protective equipment. I mean, you wear a lot, but you're not wearing body armor, really. Um, and also, there's ball hockey, right? Like, ball hockey is a big sport in a lot of countries that you probably wouldn't expect. Like, there's a version of roller hockey that is essentially on those like four-wheeled 2x2 skates, that's on a smaller court, and like Portugal plays it, and Argentina plays it, and like, so there's ball hockey in these places, and it still blows my mind. And I think this is changing this year, but it still just blows my mind that there isn't sort of a sister push from the NHL to branch out into these sort of side leagues or these side sports that are very similar and a lot more economical, and a lot more reach around the world of stuff that is, kids can watch it in, say, Kenya, and you can send them equipment and they could be playing ball hockey in 6 weeks, right? Like, it's that easy, relatively speaking, right? Because that's the whole thing they say about soccer. All you need is a ball, right?
Yeah, and
With
makeshift
ball with
goalposts, right? Like
right. So if you want to sell the game, right, like there are ways to do it without, in my opinion, making people spend $1 billion on an expansion team just to have an expansion team. I mean, it's good for the NHL because they get $1 billion split amongst the owners. But at the end of the day, to me, like expansion is one thing, but like if we're talking about growing the game, there's, I think, a lot more economical things that would appeal to a much larger audience, especially those who have never seen an ice rink before in their lives, let alone been on one or been in one. So, but I mean, yeah, I mean, and also we were talking about this earlier too, and I don't want to talk about this for 40 minutes, but like and I lost my train of thought. It's the NHL is the only league that would be going beyond 32 franchises.
Yeah.
So like, why, right? Like they would, is hockey so big that it deserves to have the most teams out of any professional league?
What I remember from one of the 32 Thoughts episodes that I saw pretty recently, it's because the NHL feels like they don't have enough American markets because they have to have more Canadian markets as a result. And so they feel like they're missing out on potential places like Atlanta, like Houston, like Salt Lake City now.
Right.
With
I mean,
King Mormon about to try and make a bid.
King Mormon, yeah. Joseph Smith himself is coming back.
Well, his name's Ryan Smith.
Exactly, yeah. Figure that one out. Maybe they're related. Who knows? I don't know. He is worth $2 billion. But anyway,
something.
He's 46 or something like that. So I don't know. Imagine Canada had a charismatic public billionaire who was like super down with sports and fun, but here we are.
Mormon.
And Mormon. That's a good plus. Yeah. And Mormon and Brian Stewart. But anyway, yes. Yeah, there's a couple of cities out there with NHL rinks. I like the idea of Austin. I still believe that a team in Toronto would work, but and again, you mentioned Halifax when we were talking about this before the show.
Like I've heard people say that, and how it's not going to happen.
that is my pipe dream pie in the sky, because I love Halifax. I love the people in Halifax. It's a really fun place to be. Probably one of the most fun cities in Canada. And they have a 10,000 seat arena for a QMJHL team that they sell out, which is great. But I don't know. I mean, there's only I think 400,000 people in Halifax. And so it just Winnipeg is almost twice as big. So it just doesn't make any sense. But maybe one day, because the Maritimes deserve lots of good stuff. But anyway, I think that's enough talk about expansion, unless you have anything else you want to throw in.
Not really. I think just personally, I wish it'd just be 32 teams. That's how I feel. As a kid, I always thought 32 would be great because it'd be 16 and 16 and everything would be equal. 8 make, 8 miss from both conferences, perfect. How they're going to upset that equilibrium so soon after expanding to 32. And I think more than anything, that kind of frustrates me because I just want 32.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person who in the car, and I'm changing the volume on the radio, it has to be a multiple of 2 or 5. It can't be anything.
No, you're just weird.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but if it's 23, I lose my mind. I can't handle it.
Hey, I was born on the 23rd, so stop.
I was born on the 21st, so according to my rules, that also doesn't work.
Yeah,
don't sass 23.
Exactly.
All right, fine. I'll try. Anyway, next topic we wanted to talk about is that Ilya Samsonov appears to be back.
Let's go.
From the dead. Appears to be back from the dead. A 32 save shutout last night. And then the previous game against Seattle stopped 16 of 17.
He's awesome.
I mean, and there were that game against Winnipeg last night. I mean, I was only able to watch the highlights this morning, but there were some 10 out of 10 save sequences there from him. Just an outstanding game from Ilya Samsonov, which is something that I think, I mean, there's lots and lots of people out there who hate the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I think anybody with a soul doesn't want to see a guy like Ilya Samsonov get the yips so bad that he can't play in the NHL anymore. Nobody is looking at Jack Campbell and laughing at him, right? I'm certainly not. I hope he comes back as a great goaltender, or at least a good one.
Some people are, but like I don't know why Jack Campbell just seems like the nicest dude.
Yeah, he's almost too nice. He's so nice he's mean to himself when he should be mean to his teammates. But yeah,
or opponents,
opponents
by not letting them score on him.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Ilya Samsonov, man, great night last night. Another really good night against Seattle. I mean, you hope he comes back, and I mean, if he comes back the way he can play, I think that certainly helps the Toronto Maple Leafs look a lot better. And their shopping list maybe gets a little bit shorter for what they need going into the deadline. But I mean, at this point, who knows what they're going to do? I mean, they probably could just sell a few things at this point based on what people are talking about. But if Samsonov, oh yeah, well that's never been in doubt.
Now
I had a good.
You go on.
I was just going to say I had a good time quote tweeting myself from November 6th or something, saying that Nick Robertson needs to be a thing because it's about time. And every time he stepped on the ice this year, anyone who watches Leaf games, he's been great. He's been a major part of what they need, and they keep benching him. So now that he's getting an extended look, he's running with it. Thankfully, he's not dejected about it. And he's running with it. So
on the one goal in the game, but
that shift, it was a great shift too.
That I think will do it for the Leafs stuff because we don't want to just become a Leaf show. But Ilias, right. We had to mention Ilya Samsonov because I love him.
And it was a great game last night too. Both goalies played extremely well. Both him and Connor Hellebuck, obviously.
Oh, it was Laurent Brossoit, actually.
Oh, was it Laurent Brossoit? See, I saw the highlights. I didn't pay attention to the actual person in the net. But Laurent Brossoit, also known to save a lot of pucks once in a while. But anyway, we can move on from the Leafs because I don't want to go down that road too much. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about what's actually going on with the LA Kings. So the LA Kings have now lost back-to-back games against San Jose, unfortunately, and the Buffalo Sabres last night. I watched the first two periods of the game last night against Buffalo and woke up to see them lose 5-3, which sucks. They blew a 3-1 lead. They jumped out to a lead last night and kind of blew it. And they've lost 12 of their last 14 games, regardless of overtime or not. They've just lost 12 times in the last 14 games. And there were some spicy comments today or last night after the game. I would say most notably from Drew Doughty. So we can throw to what he said because it was juicy.
What has to change here?
I think we got guys in this room who are too worried about themselves and worried about their points and worried about stuff like that. We get a 3-1 lead tonight. And guys start thinking it's a cookie night, and we stop playing the way we know how to play, have an awful second period, and then aren't much better in the third. It's about the team. It's not about yourself, and a lot of guys on this team need to realize that.
And you're back.
That AJ, I don't think that's something you want to hear from a leader of your team very often.
Cookie night.
Not great.
Cookie night. That's what stood out to me. Cookie night. What an ridiculous, he's not wrong.
No.
But hearing a two-time Stanley Cup champion, Drew Doughty, say guys are out there looking for cookies. I mean, hockey terms are so dumb, which makes it awesome.
Yeah.
Imagine flaming your team and saying cookie within the same.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
That's why hockey's awesome. But
yeah, it's one of the best things about hockey, the slang.
But man, that's just brutal. It's 12 of 14 that they've lost.
Yes.
And to San Jose and Buffalo recently. That is bad.
And so I'm going to start with a bookend of things. Todd McClellan also had something interesting to say last night that I thought was obviously interesting, but he was saying that he wasn't thinking that through all of these losses that the LA Kings were playing super poorly or I think he used the word dumb. We weren't playing poorly or dumb until tonight. He's like, tonight I think we played really poorly and that's an interesting thing.
He's like, we lost in a stupid way.
Yes, yeah, something like that. And so to me, that was interesting and worth a little bit of a dig and seeing if that was correct. But the Kings, through all of this, they are now in a wild card spot after an absolutely insane start to the year, both on paper and in the win column. They're 2 points back of the Oilers, and the Oilers have 2 games in hand. That is not where you want to be. They had the league leading penalty kill starting the year, and that seems to have just gone down the toilet. The percentage of shots that they're both getting from scoring positions and allowing from scoring positions, it's both declined at both ends. So they're not as much of a heavy freewheeling team as they used to be, and that may factor in a little bit. Everything seems to be more about perimeter chances, both for and against. And I mean, we can talk about this guy a little bit because it's worth chatting about, and we watched him a bit over the last 24 hours. But a lot of people are picking on Pierre-Luc Dubois, and he's being paid a lot of money.
I think
I would say rightly so as well. And my impression of watching Pierre-Luc Dubois a little bit, and I think you and I came to a relatively similar conclusion, but like, especially because this is more of a draft and like projection show kind of thing, or like that's a big aspect of what I do. Pierre-Luc Dubois, like, it's such an interesting case study of why you need to watch a player's entire game and like really understand what their weaknesses mean for the strengths, or like what they don't do means for what they do. And with Pierre-Luc Dubois, like when you watch him, we were watching him and both kind of coming away going like, if he's got the puck, he's making decent plays. If he's got the puck, he goes to the net. He like, I was watching that game last night. He had a couple of really good chances right off the top. The game before, the game before against San Jose, he had a couple of great chances early on, and like he's getting looks and getting chances, but the problem is without the puck. Like, it's bad. Like, is that the word you would use? Like,
it's definitely not ideal.
No, like not much of a back checker, not really causing a lot of havoc going with the pucks coming across the blue line against him. Like, I've seen him be in the realm of another player, but not really touch them to like separate them from the puck at all. And like, I'm not a guy who goes out there and be like, I need you to punish these guys. I need you to go out there and throw them to the ice and wrestle them to the ground. But if a guy has the puck, you gotta want to have it from him in order to get it from him. And it just doesn't seem like Pierre-Luc Dubois is doing a whole lot of that. It seems like that seems to be a thing with a couple of guys on the Kings, but with him, it is certainly number one. It is very apparent, probably most apparent.
Right.
And two, relative to what he's being paid, that makes it, to me, exponentially worse, right?
And
like,
what they paid to get him, because that is, I think, the biggest problem in all this. When you gave up a guy like Gabe Vilardi, who didn't play last night for the Jets, but has still had a pretty good season, you gave up on a player that's got a lot of talent. And if you're going to make that bet on Pierre-Luc Dubois, you better be damn sure that you got your 2C at the very least. And they're flirting with playing him on the fourth line.
Yeah, it's not doable. Like, he's an $8.5 million player
that they gave
that is
up
being paid
3 players for.
Yeah, and they're paying him until 2031, right? Like, it's like Steve Dangle says this all the time, but this is what you wanted. That when you get a big paycheck like that and you are put in a role like that and you're there for a long time through your best years, like, people have the right to criticize you, right? Like, you're taking up more than 10% of the salary cap. People have a right to sort of look at that and go, we need more out of you, buddy. Like, he's on pace for 40 points or 36 points. Like, that's a non-option for $8.5 million. I don't care how good you are defensively, and he's not. So
how many points is Gabe Vilardi on pace for this year?
I mean, he spent a little bit hurt, but I'll take a look.
Sure,
but he spent a little
pace,
bit.
I bet you it's higher, which is not good.
Yeah, he's on pace. He's got 20 points in 26 games this year. So he's on pace for 47 points in 62 games, which is, I don't know, maybe like a 60-point pace, I think, if you scale it to 82 games. Like, and we were talking about this last night because like I've watched a little bit of Velarde on the Jets, and it's like if the trade were, if, in retrospect, like Velarde for Pierre-Luc Dubois straight up, I mean, I don't know how you don't go for Velarde, because he does bring you that motor and that engine at both ends that you don't really get with Pierre-Luc Dubois. So it's a good example to me, and you can stop me if I'm talking too much, but it's a good example to me of like the thing that I always say, which is like the more you play well defensively and the more you want to get the puck away from the other team and the more you try, the more times you're going to get chances to play offensively, especially at the NHL level. Like if you're kind of more of a sit back and see what happens type of guy, capitalizing on loose pucks and everything, you're just not going to generate as many turnovers, and you're not going to be able to get the puck into the offensive zone as often. So that limits your opportunities to even try to put the puck in the net. And I feel like that's a problem also with Dubois, because like we said, the play with the puck and the skill level and the potential is there. Like you see it. It's just the shortcomings torpedo kind of the whole thing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is the most interesting to look at with Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think a lot of times we've known that he's just not necessarily the most consistent player defensively, but I think there were a lot of excuses made for him that, once he gets to a team he wants to be on, he'll try.
Right.
When it was really just masking the fact that he isn't super intense in like when he's off the puck. Which is why there were times where John Tortorella yelled at him when he was on Columbus.
Right.
I remember very distinctly, "Are you a number one center?" Like John Tortorella yelling at him on the bench.
Yep.
Is that you? And sometimes he can be that.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
he puts his mind to it, he can do it. Like I honestly think he could be a good defensive player too if he really hunkered down and worked at it. Like he's got the tools to be really, really good and worth that contract. But he's got to put it together.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's hard to do that, like mentally. Don't get me wrong. Trying to improve
absolutely.
yourself is very difficult to take steps. I try and do it all the time and fail. So
yeah, Same.
it's. So I understand, like from a human perspective, it's not easy to do that. But if he does, he could be so good, so much better, really, and really be worth that contract. And I think you had to see him hit like a higher. Well, he needed to have like been at a higher level than he is now in order to really warrant that contract. I understand why they did it, and I thought it was a good move. But I think I fell into the camp of, well, let's just see what he does when he finally gets his way. But not a lot's changed. So hopefully for him, because really, like, I wish the best for a lot of these guys. I want to see people succeed in the NHL. I'd really like to see PL just do really well on the Kings and figure it out, because he's a good player and he's got the potential to be an even better one. So here's to hoping that he figures it out and LA snaps out of this, because I think it'd be really funny if the Oilers got first round bounced.
Yeah, and I mean, on the plus side, like financially, obviously having an $8.5 million guy on the cap who's not what you expected right now, the Kings still aren't like screwed, really. Like Anze Kopitar is making $3 million less next season for a couple of years. Kevin Fiala is also, I would say, a guy who, without the puck, sometimes can be frustrating, but he's less than Dubois, 7.87. But then they've got like Phil Deneau and Adrian Kempe and Trevor Moore coming in at $15 million combined, just under $16 million combined. Vladislav Gavrikov under $6 million. He's played pretty well this year. Like, they aren't screwed just because they have PLD at this number, but you still have to hope that he gets to be what he can be again, because it's just way too much money on a guy who, like you said, might be on your fourth line at this point, trying to sort of earn his minutes back.
And I don't think he's like that. He should be there by any means. He should be
not at all.
In your top six, or at the very least on your third line, because he's got the talent to warrant it. for sure. It's
Yeah.
just, is he going to be able to get over the mental hump and actually just become a better player?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's got it. He's got the tools to do it. He's got the resources to do it. Just can he put it together?
So to close the LA Kings discussion, I did find some pretty interesting stuff if you look under the hood. So the way the thing I called this is like, is the party over? Because early in the season, they were playing fantastically. Like, this is a team that's capable of anything they want when you watch them play, like, in my opinion. I think when you watch the Kings, when they're playing well, they are a really, really great team, but it just hasn't happened recently. So this is in the span of their last 14 games during their losing streak. They have the second lowest goals for percentage in the league, which is at 36%. And the only team worse is Chicago, and I believe they're at 27%, which is astounding. But in that 14-game stretch, they have the fourth highest rate of expected goals for, the 13th highest rate of expected goals for percentage. So they are a top half of the team when it comes to where their scoring chances are coming from, and they're allowing a little bit more defensively, but still they're still a top half team in terms of goal differential, but they're 31st when it comes to actual goals. If you look at their losing streak, so their points percentage right now is a 321 through those 14 games, which is bad. But if you sort the league in that last period of time by expected goals for percentage, and look at the three teams ahead of them and the three teams behind them, their points percentages: Toronto's above 500, Ottawa's above 400, Buffalo's above 500, Arizona's above 400, Colorado's a 769, the Islanders are a 385, and LA's a 321. So they're surrounded by teams that have won more games or at least gotten more points with a similar balance of pucks going in and pucks, similar balance of pucks going in. So it's not going in relative to expectations at a rate worse than everybody in the league, even Chicago. And that's because Chicago's not great. So the question I ask myself is, are the LA Kings as bad as the Chicago Blackhawks? Because their goals for percentage says so, and they're the only other team in the league that is under a 950 PDO. So if you know what a PDO is, it's save percentage plus shooting percentage. And they're below a 950 in the last 14 games, and the only other team like that is Chicago. So are they as bad as that team? I don't think the answer to that is yes. I just don't believe that you go from a team that looks like a Stanley Cup contender to one of the worst teams ever assembled in one season. It just doesn't make any sense. So Todd McClellan, I think, is right when he's up there saying, I don't think we've played poorly or stupid or deserve to be where we are, but tonight I think we deserve it. And I think that that's a fair statement. So if there's people out there who are sort of going, what a boneheaded thing to say when you've lost 12 of 14 games, it's like, you still do have to be realistic, right? Like, you do have to look at what is happening on the ice, because hockey is a weird sport. And AJ, you know this as much as anybody.
There's a
like,
lot of
weird
noise.
Stuff happens all the time. There's a lot of noise. It's a lot of strange stuff. And yeah, there might be some issues for sure, but generally speaking, this is a team that is losing a lot more than they should, or at least a little bit more than they should have been. And I'm hopeful. I still think that they can figure it out, because they were so good at the beginning of the year. I just can't believe that this is what they're going to be for the rest of the season. The other NHL thing we wanted to bring up was the New York Rangers. And so the Rangers have been a division leader almost all season, if I recall correctly, but they've lost 9 of their last 14. They've allowed 39 goals, or they've scored just 39 goals in that stretch. Their special teams generally has been top 10, both penalty killing and on the power play. And their goaltending had been quite good, but it's kind of slowed down a little bit over the last stretch. I mean, AJ, you've wanted to talk about the Rangers for a little while,
yes.
Because of what they've been doing as a team, and I'm curious of what your thoughts are on where the Rangers are, since this is more of your domain.
I think they're coming back down to earth more than anything. I felt at the beginning of the season they were just getting points and doing it in ways that were kind of unsustainable. And the Rangers kind of have that ability anyways. Like, they're one of the teams that I find, at least in recent years, where they kind of outperform the way that definitely their analytics, for sure,
Yep.
Like they get goaltending help a lot. I think playing at Madison Square Garden has just like helped them get better at dealing with bounces than other teams. Like that, I think that might be a legitimate reason as to why they succeed a lot, because Madison Square Garden, like, and I'm not. This is not a main point, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Do you see how many lucky bounces they got at the beginning of the year? Like, I just feel like they're the best at capitalizing on bounces in a way that other teams just can't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And when you look under the hood, like the Rangers are kind of like mid, like they're not bad, right? Like this is a team that, all things considered, probably is like a bubble team or like should be like in a wild card spot or something, but they're a division leading team, or at least they were last I checked.
Yeah, they still are. They still are
somehow.
Yeah, they're still atop of the Metro. They've got a lot of star power. Like, they've got a lot of really good players, like Adam Fox, Artemi Panarin, Igor Shesterkin, even guys like Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad. Like, these are really good players.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you look beyond that, and I'm not saying like Lafreniere's bad, because I watched him today and he looks much better. Much better player. He's quicker. He looks more skilled. He's getting around the ice better and working with Panarin well, and it looks good. I also saw Kakko, and he's just fine. Like, are they what you wanted out of first and second overall picks? No, but they're good NHL players. More so on Lafreniere. Like, Kakko is more towards like the middle of the NHL in terms of players, but like he's still decent. It's not that he's a bad player. The wheels fall off when you look at the guys below that. Right, like Nick Bonino has not been good this year, and he's getting waived.
He's on waivers today. Yeah,
Barclay Goodrow, that contract was
not
crazy.
Good.
Blake Wheeler, we've seen for years that he's not been good, and it's fine that they gave him like a very small amount of money to try it out.
Right,
but it just wasn't gonna work.
Well, he just hasn't been good, right? Like he just hasn't really moved the needle for them at all. And even names like you wouldn't expect, like they're core guys, like Jacob Trouba's results haven't been super great this year. Same thing with Keandre Miller, especially in this stretch of losing 9 of their last 14. Like him, those two guys and Ryan Lindgren, like those guys eat a lot of minutes, and they're not, at least on paper, they're not particularly doing well these days on the ice. And so, yeah, I think you're right though. Like I think you're right in the sense that like they're just sort of coming back to where they should be.
Yeah.
And that's just math, right? Like that's just mathematics at work. Ilya Samsonov statistically probably wasn't as bad as he was. So coming back and having a couple of really hot nights and sort of getting that back a little bit. Yeah, I'm sure some of it is psychological, but also, he probably just wasn't as bad as he was before. So with the Rangers, it's more the opposite. Like they're more not as good as what they were. So it's kind of regressing back to where they are. The LA Kings, I just think it's just crazy, weird stuff going on. But with the Rangers, yeah, I mean, the depth of it, like, again, we talk about this all the time, man. Like the depth of your team can kill you, right? Like if your bottom 6 ain't really able to compete with or shut down other teams' top 6s, like you're gonna lose,
And
and there's a bunch of teams that are like that
every single night, right? Like New York's power play is awesome.
Yes,
because Panarin's a wizard. Kreider is really good at tipping pucks and he's fast. Zibanejad is a great puck mover and just smart guy.
Yeah.
Like they've got weapons on that power play. Adam Fox is an amazing quarterback. Like they have some awesome pieces, and even Igor can like grab the puck. Like he can start a breakout because he's that good at stuff like that. Like that's why I love Igor so much.
Mm-hmm.
He just keeps the play alive. So the Rangers have the ability to keep the puck moving pretty much at all times when they're on the power play, and they're really good at it. But when it comes to 5-on-5, the past couple of years have not been great. And it's showing again now. They haven't played well recently, and I think it's the 5-on-5 play that's really hindered them, and it's because of the guys lower in the lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, in a situation like this, I'm curious of what you think, because I honestly don't know the answer to this, but like, what do you do? Like if you're the New York Rangers going into, say, trade deadline season, Like, do you think that you need to make a move to stay afloat, or do you sort of go, maybe this isn't our year and rethink it? Like, I get the feeling that it's the former. You know, NHL teams don't usually give up on seasons if they are competitive. But I don't know what you do to sort of fix it, because even their big guys are kind of struggling lately.
Like, you know who'd be great on the New York Rangers? I wonder. Am I going to say his name again?
Elias Lindholm?
No,
maybe?
no. I was thinking
Anthony
somebody cheaper.
Duclair?
Yeah, that's who it is.
Oh, yeah. The playbook is open.
Speed.
Right.
Like, I think he'd be fun. Like, put him in a top 6 role, move Kakko down a line. And it's not like Kakko, like I said, he's not a bad player. He's just not a second overall caliber guy. And I think the Rangers have already accepted that. But he's still a good player, right? He's still a good player, still a useful young player that you can put on a third line with, like, Filipino when he comes back, because he's also been out, and that might also be a reason why they've had not the greatest record here. But, like, you just got to play faster. Like, I was watching Artemi Panarin, and I thought, oh my God, this guy is just so Leafs in terms of his pace. So Leafs, but he's awesome. He really is awesome.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that they kind of do need a bit of an injection of speed. And on one hand, I agree. And if you're a Rangers fan watching this, like, a good example of kind of the thing that might help them, if you had someone like this with a bit more offense in their game, like an Anthony Duclair. But, like, look at what Will Cooley is doing for that team this year. You know, he's not, you know, he's got 8 goals this year. He's not gonna score a cajillion points, but when you watch him play, like, he's driving fast, he goes hard, and he you know, he's a physical player, like what the Rangers like to see, but he gets around and he forechecks well, and he also, it's simple for him. He just goes to the net, like, he's a crash and bang guy. You know, he's a decent shooter as well, but he's more of a crash and bang guy who can really move. And, you know, there might not be a ton of diversity in his game, but he does what he does really well. And it's certainly, he's been recently, at least on paper, one of the better Rangers through this sort of losing streak, even if it's not showing up on the score sheet. Like, he's a guy who I think is putting in a lot and giving the team a lot. So yeah, I think when you look at what the guys that maybe aren't performing super well, like a Gaudreau or a Blake Wheeler or whatever, it's like, well, these guys are older, and maybe sort of the older guard that's aging out of the league, and guys like a Will Cooley are an example of players that, you know, may not score a ton of points, but, like, are the new breed of bottom 6 forward. Like, look at Noah Gregor in Toronto, right? Like, he's a guy who is just a goer. He goes and goes and goes, and the speed is there. Everybody's talking about Nick Robertson. Like, all these guys who can really move are the ones that are catching eyeballs. And with the Rangers, they just seem to lack a little bit of that. At 5-on-5, when you don't have that, it can be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, it's an interesting case study. It's always interesting to me watching these NHL teams over the years, like, fluctuate through the year and see where they end up, and who's outperforming and who isn't, and who, you know, who might come back down to earth, or who might have a strong back half. You know, the Oilers were a great example of a team that just didn't deserve to be as bad as they were. The Kings these days are a team that I think are worse than they deserve. And the Rangers are a team that rode a hot streak. The Vancouver Canucks are a team that is riding a real hot streak for the whole season so far. We'll see if that keeps going. Like, if they make a couple additions, maybe that helps. But it's always interesting to see these sort of things change and teams shift and change over the course of the season. So we're also a prospect show, and last night was a very, somewhat important, more interesting date on the prospect calendar, the NHL draft calendar, and that was the CHL Top Prospects game. So again, like I mentioned, I'll be doing a game report on Puck Preps for anybody who's a subscriber over there or who would like to become one. Honestly, when I watch the CHL Top Prospects game, I'm not really watching to, like, form opinions or judge a player based on how they play in that tournament, in that game. But the way I see it is it's a good example. It's like the World Juniors, but on a much smaller scale. It's a good way to see a fish out of water. How do the Quebec guys play against the OHL team, or the WHL guys stack up against the Q guys? How does everything sort of lay out? And if you have a good performance at this game, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, but I think it does. You really want to see what they can do when they're under the microscope, in a way, if that makes sense. Like you just kind of want to see who are the goers, right? Like we're talking about Will Cooley, right? Who are the guys that go? Who are the guys that have that speed, that pace against the so-called best of the best in Canada, right? Like you've brought all these guys together. Who are the ones that really sort of make an impact in some way? And so my approach was just to sort of note who was making, good plays here and there, and just sort of think and reflect on like where I was on those players going into the game and what I saw in that game, and whether it reinforced it or maybe gave me something to think about or whatever. And I definitely, there were some players that I noted a lot that will appear in that game report that's coming out. So Team Red won, in case you don't know. Team Red won 3-1 off of a 3-point night from Raul Boyard. So Raul Boyard, 3-point night, big win for Team Red. I mean, I felt that Team White carried a lot more of the chances. I thought Ryerson Leanders had a great game in net, but, goaltending is goaltending. He had a great night. So did Lucas Matecha, who I had never seen play before last night. But on that Red team, I mean, everybody talks about Raul Boyard and the 3-point night that he had last night and everything, and he was quite good. But, I was surprised that Andrew Basha didn't see as much ice as I hoped he would or thought he would, because I thought he played really well in the shifts that he got. I thought Cole Baudouin also was a guy who showed really well last night. A guy who, again, I've been talking a little bit about recently, is a guy who's been moving up the list over the course of the season. Merrick Vanacker is another guy who I only recently just started watching. Brantford Bulldogs winger. I thought he had a really good game. I thought he and on the White team, I thought he and Beckett Seneke kind of were somewhat similar. I like Seneke's sort of skill level and creativity and sort of the resilience that he has, but Vanacker does have a similar sort of read of the ice, the way he sees the ice. He's got a good frame to protect the puck with. I still, he's not a super high intensity, high pace guy, which might be a bit of an issue, but it'll be interesting to see how guys like him and Seneke and Liam Greentree also, how they develop over the years, because those are guys who aren't burners, but they find ways to get around it and do things that make sense, that can still move play forward. So those were the guys to me that stood out on a first glance that I noted a few times for that team. And on the White team, Jet Lachenko, again, had a pretty good night. Again, was still kind of what I expected. Like there wasn't anyone in this game where I watched them and went, oh man, I really got to go back and watch them again. Like there were just a bunch of guys who I think are okay. Like I think the CHL group this year is okay. I really liked TJ Ginla's game though. TJ Ginla, I thought, played quite well. High intensity guy, high effort guy, pretty good skill as well. He's given 100% out there, and you can tell. And I liked his performance last night, even though I don't think he was rewarded quite enough for it. Kieran Walton was another guy I noted a couple of times, a guy who I see here and there in the OHL and have liked, especially as sort of a project guy. He's really tall, really big, but I think there's a lot of skill there, a really good shot as well. I think there's a guy who could be, like if you really like a guy like Kasper Haltonen and sort of how he plays, where it's very shot heavy, it's very physical. Walton may not be as physical, but there's a similar frame there. There's a similar sort of skill level there. Like Haltonen does have some decent skill to create a shooting lane or whatnot. And I think Walton is pretty close to there. So maybe he's a guy that made a bit of an impact for me. I thought Sam O'Reilly played pretty well as well. Carter Yakimchuk is a guy who, it's funny, like I have him lower in my list than most people. And after last night, that didn't change. There was a couple of guys who were really down low on my list where I went, all right, I'm going to take another look at this guy, but if it hasn't really come together, or if there's not anything that I haven't seen before out of this player, then I may just take them right off. Yakimchuk wasn't that at all, but he certainly was Carter Yakimchuk last night. Like, the thing that makes him so interesting is the skill level in the offensive zone. Like, he'll stand at the blue line and find a way to get through a layer, try to get through another layer, and it'll end up on highlight reels. Like, I feel like I've seen him do the same thing, or I've seen the same GIF of him doing the same thing 6 or 7 times this year, of just trying to put pucks through guys' legs. He's not moving super quickly, but he gets there, right? He makes junior defensemen look silly. And, I thought he did the same thing last night. And when you look at the defense group that they had last night, the one that I liked actually on the red team for defending, in real defending, was like Ben Danford. I thought Ben Danford had a nice night for a defensive player. But yeah, like when you look up and down that lineup and you see like Colton Roberts, Zane Perrick, who is also not, I would say, known for his defending. Sam Dickinson is a solid defender. I thought he was solid last night, but I don't think he was anything super special. But he was solid. But Yakimchuk, I think, found a way through guys like that with the skill level that he has. And I noted him a few times for some good plays. I made a joke about Berkeley Catton maybe being a guy that should have had a really good night. And I think he almost had a really good night. Like, he had a lot of moments where he was trying the right things or thinking things the right way. It just, he just maybe waited a half a second too long and ended up pinned along the boards. Or, he passed a puck and it just knocked off of someone's stick or off their skate, and whatever. Silly bounces happen. Because I didn't note him as much as I thought I would. But it doesn't really change what I think about the guy. And AJ, you watched him the other day. He's friggin' sick. He's awesome.
He's a lot of fun.
He's a lot of fun. And so, yeah.
Not necessarily the guy who's going to go all the time, but just a player that you see understands the game really well, and I think his brain will translate to the NHL. So the Leafs will love him, even though he will not get drafted there.
You never know. Brad Lambert was 30th. You never know.
It's not going to happen, Will.
I know.
As much as
if we were Finnish, it might happen.
Yeah, because the Finns would hate him for not scoring in league.
Probably, yeah. Because they hate good players over there.
He does not score.
He doesn't score goals. I don't think he's any good. Anyway, the other 2 names the 3 names I wanted to bring up just before we move on to the question section of the show was Luke Misa, Beckett Seneke, and Liam Greentree. I thought those 3 guys had great games. Luke Misa, there are frustrating areas of his game. I tracked a game of his yesterday, and he played very well in that game. And I thought that his CHL performance, the top prospects game performance, was also quite good. Really fast, really skilled. He's a guy who will be grinding the puck along the boards, and the second it gets free, he's putting it into scoring areas, which, some might think is a bad thing because he might not be shoulder checking or whatever. But to me, you can work around that. It's just like, well, if Luke Meese is grinding in the corner, go to the friggin' net, right? Like that's kind of the lesson for me. And in Mississauga, that's what they do. And Porter Martone cleans up the garbage and scores goals. Beckett Seneke, I thought, was one of the better players on the ice last night. I thought he played really, really well, just making creative plays, adapting to pressure really well, like showing a lot of things that for an NHL player, I think you want to see. And similar things for Liam Greentree. Like, he's a slow skater. He's, he takes a long time to get up to speed, but he's a player where it almost doesn't matter, right? Like, he's a guy who you could have him in double coverage and he'll find a way through the pressure. And I thought he had a few really, really good moments last night and scored their only goal last night. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be more details in the Puck Preps post, and I'm sure people will ask, but those are my general thoughts on last night. So let's do a quick ad read before we get into the questions. So again, we are brought to you by Fanatics. So you can use the affiliate link below or scan the QR code in the stream window to provide a small kickback to us on anything you buy in the store. You can also support me and Sam McGilligan through Puck Preps, where me and him and a bunch of other pretty smart people cover NCAA prospects and CHL entry draft prospects across the continent, I guess you could say. We're also sponsored by Fractal Hockey Consulting, which is my business for hand-track player analysis, and recruitment packages focused on the NCAA and Europe and beyond. And of course, this website, scouching.ca, so you can subscribe for exclusive access to data tools that you won't find anywhere else, with insights into the draft and players making their mark in the NHL. And I will take this moment to note that the data visualizations using some of the data that I track, they're under construction right now. So they're going to be posted because I think I have enough players tracked with big enough samples where I can present some stuff to subscribers. So if you subscribe to the top tier of the site, you'll have access to not only the 2024 prospect data that I'll be putting out, but I am also working on an archive. So all the data that I've tracked from 2020, 21, 22, and 23, obviously you won't be able to scroll through the whole spreadsheet of it, but there will be a dashboard of data visualizations that you can poke through and play around with. But it just also takes, there's been about, I think, I want to like 500 players or something that I've done over the years, maybe more. So there's a lot of logos to comb through and custom add those to the Tableau dashboard. And that gets and that can only be done by hand, and it's very tedious. But anyway, that's coming on the way. So if you are thinking about becoming a subscriber, there's more coming to the platform in the coming month, I would say. And again, my rankings are out as well for subscribers of any tier. They'll be made public on Monday, and then Monday night we're going to do a Scouching ranking show, which is going to be a lot of fun. So let's get over to the questions. Oh, one more thing before we go. Sorry, I totally forgot to mention this, but Jeff Merrick said today that last night was probably the last CHL Top Prospects game. Instead, they're thinking of doing a 2-game series with U.S. prospects against Canadian ones, which is going to be amazing. Like, AJ, you and I have talked about how this is kind of a thing that they maybe need to do more, right?
Absolutely.
Like U.S.-Canada cross-border rivalry. I would love that. I think that would be so fascinating.
I also think it's just easier to market that rather
100%.
than just a CHL Top Prospect game. That's more for people who care about the CHL more than anything.
And
you
of
get
course,
Canada versus America.
Yeah,
that's going to bring in more people because Canadians really love to think that they're so much better than Americans. So they're going to watch just because they want to see their team stomp them.
Yeah,
but the
won't. NTDP, it'll probably be mostly NTDP guys against a CHL All-Star team would be so much fun. I'll be looking forward to that. I also find it very funny that CHL's Top Prospect game is sponsored by Kubota. Like, that says all you need to know about the type of marketing that they need to do to like get people to watch this.
Company?
Like they make chainsaws and like ATVs and like outdoorsy stuff for Canadians, basically.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know because I'm a city boy.
Exactly. But yeah, that's basically what they are. And they've been sponsoring it for years because a lot of these fans are likely from outside of Toronto, where Kubota is more of a household name. But in any case, maybe that'll change next year with more U.S. exposure. But yeah, so let's go over to questions because looks like quite a few of them. What happened to Anthony Cristoforo? Seemed he was penciled in for the first round earlier in the year and has fallen off the map. So I think Cristoforo is a good example of a guy who he was on a spectacularly good Toronto Junior Canadiens team when he was drafted into the OHL. And I watched him on that team. There was a few guys that I was watching on that team. And I mean, he was the guy that was sort of getting the puck up the ice, funneling it to the guys up front, like Porter Martone, and Michael Hage was on that team, and Jack Van Volsen. And they just sort of took it from there. Like, Cristoforo was a guy who I think sort of, he was one of those guys where he was definitely more skilled than most AAA players. But when he moves up to the OHL, he's more of a guy, right? He seems to just be that type of player where his game just hasn't translated to be what it needs to be in the OHL to play the same way. And this happens with defenders going to the NHL, right? The way that they do things in the OHL or the USHL or an NCAA, it just doesn't necessarily translate to the National Hockey League. Because I've seen Cristoforo a few times this year. The biggest thing with me is again, it's another one of these things where you can score as many points as you want as a defenseman. And Cristoforo has scored a decent rate this year, but he scored a ton in AAA. But if you can't stop the puck in your own end, if you can't chip in and you're not very effective in your own end, especially as a defenseman, it makes your life extremely tough. And Cristoforo is pretty slight. He has trouble winning battles. And when he does get the puck back, the skill level and the evasiveness and the quickness just isn't quite there. You know, and a player like him, to me, that plays somewhere else in a bit of a more projectable way is Henry Muse. Like, he's not the fastest guy, not the most skilled guy, but it is often that Henry Muse is finding an option that makes sense and acting quickly. Like, he'll get the puck back in his own end, not the best defensive player, but he's okay. And he'll see the ice really well and make a good read and move the puck well. And that's kind of where Henry Muse has found success relative to an Anthony Cristoforo, because I just haven't seen that out of him yet. I mean, I'm going to watch more of him towards the end of the year, because I don't think he's a guy who doesn't deserve to be drafted, but it's also a guy who so far this year I have not seen enough to put him on my list. When you look at some of the defensemen that are at the tail end of my order. Why has Dean Letourneau been climbing up lists? What's his game? Yeah, Dean Letourneau is going to be fascinating. So he is on my
big.
Yep. Yes, yeah, you're right. He is 6'6", or more, 6'6", 6'7", and he looks like it. He looks like he looks like, I don't know how to put it, but he looks gigantic out there, and he is very big. And I have a really hard time with Canadian high school hockey. Granted, St. Andrews College is playing in a league with other prep schools like Shattuck St. Mary's, and Dean Letourneau has, I think, 30 goals in 30 games in that league, or something like 35 goals in 30 games. And so, I mean, I saw that he was in the first round of Bob McKenzie's list. He's on the first round of Sam Cosentino's list. I feel like that's a little bit rich. I've seen Dean Letourneau, I want to say twice or three times. I think twice with St. Andrews. And then I watched both games he played with Sioux Falls. So if you don't know, over the Christmas break, he went to Sioux Falls and played in the USHL for a couple of games. I tracked one of them, the second one he played, because obviously the first game you play in the USHL as a Canadian high school player might be a little dicey. And for him, it kind of was. But I didn't have Dean Letourneau ranked before that game, because I don't really feel super comfortable ranking a Canadian high school 6'7" guy. Because I want to say that, like, I'm just making this up on the spot, but like I'll call it the Waterloo guy rule, where I went to a shinny game one night and there was a guy there with a University of Waterloo helmet and a number on it, and he was at least 6'5", and he was not trying at all. You could tell, but no one could touch him because everybody else was not good, or at least as good, and couldn't wrap their stick around him. He just could protect the puck so well just because of how big he was. There was a guy I played ball hockey against who was on the Greek national ball hockey team, and he must have been, I think he told us he was 6'8" or 6'9", and his shot was just lightning. Like, you couldn't stop it. It was ridiculous. And I just remember, I was a defender, still am, but I defended, and he was one of the guys I had to defend, and I was hopeless. It was hopeless. I'm 6 feet tall. It was hopeless, unless I was like some sort of athletic god, which I'm not, certainly. I mean, look at me. But Dean Letourneau at the junior level in high school feels a little bit like that. He's got a decent set of hands for a giant guy. He goes to the net. He knows how to, he goes to the net, lifts sticks, and taps in pucks a lot of the time. So I didn't have him ranked, but watching him in the USHL, they put him on the wing, and I felt that while he lacks quite a lot of foot speed, there still is a good ability to, being so big, like there's a smooth skating stride there. Again, he's not super quick, but he gets around okay. And he was really clever with moving the puck up the ice. He got very few chances to shoot the puck because he was trailing the offense quite a bit. But, he had a few moments where I sort of went, okay. Like, I could see this guy being more interesting to me the more I watch him. It's just, I hope he plays more in the USHL, because I don't know, I would never use a first round draft pick on a guy who's playing Canadian high school hockey, even if the opponents are like Shattuck St. Mary's or something. I just don't think that like, again, it's, are you really going to take that risk? And I'm sure because he's 6'6" and can score a lot of goals on paper, people will do that. People will probably, NHL people will go, yeah, he's 6'6", and a lanky but somewhat skilled forward. Of course, we're going to take that. He could be Tage Thompson, which, okay, I can't say no. I can't say it's impossible, but I get the feeling like, again, it's a lot of the times in the draft, it's like, I don't dislike this player. It's just there's a lot of other guys that I kind of like a similar amount and just kind of would bump him down by virtue of that. So it's an interesting one. I kind of disagree with like a first round valuation, but not far back. I don't think like a late second, mid to late second guy could be a thing. But I know he'll go before that.
And just going off of Elite Prospects measurements, like what's listed, he's 6'7" and 209 pounds. So
yeah,
that's the kind of dude we're talking about.
Yeah, like, yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what he becomes. Like, it's obviously like if he gets drafted like 21st overall, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't do it, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't really care if he really worked out a lot. Like, not in a way where I'm like, oh, I don't think he's ever going to be good. But if I had turned out to be wrong on him being sort of a top end guy, then that's a good lesson for me because he's going to be very interesting to watch. I wouldn't make fun of a team that drafts him ahead of, say, Andrew Basha, right? Like, I see the argument. I wouldn't do it, but potentially see the argument. But anyway, he's interesting. What are your thoughts on Raul Boyard? Yeah, I mean, I figured I was going to get this question because he had 3 points last night. I've done 2 games of Boyard. I've seen another one, and he's a smart guy in Quebec. Like, he is a smart player. Again, he's another one of these guys where the tools aren't necessarily super high end, but the brain is pretty good. The way he sees the ice, the timing he has on his passes, all that fun stuff is good. But the data I have on him is very mediocre to not great. Like, he's not shooting the puck a whole lot. He's not creating a whole lot of offense for his line mates. But when it comes to passing the puck and seeing the ice and sort of seeing options and timing things, he's decent at it, I suppose. But again, like, if I'm looking at the text that summarizes a lot of my data, a lot of it is not great. But his ability to sort of stitch a play together is there. I don't have him ranked. Spoiler alert for Monday, Boyard is not on the list. And after watching the game last night, I don't have him on the list. Again, I know he scored 3 points, but in a 1-game sample, points are to me kind of secondary. Even though he also hit the post on one of his shots, so he could have had 4. But I don't think it's some sort of revelation for me that he's actually a super, super highly touted guy. But he'll get drafted. I just haven't seen a whole lot that moves the needle for me a tremendous amount. Any thoughts on Aiden Fink? Seems to be making a major impact in NCAA without much support in terms of quality line mates. Yeah, I watched a game of Aiden Fink not too long ago because he has been so good on Penn State in terms of scoring points. And yeah, I mean, I think that a second go around for him getting drafted is perfectly reasonable. He's a guy that I had on and off my list last year just because the AJHL is a tricky league to evaluate and he was on a powerhouse team, but the skill was there. And he's got a pretty quick release on his shot. I think a lot of the stuff I've seen of him this year, he's sort of taking shots from non-scoring areas. Penn State's conference, I don't believe, is the particularly the best one, but I'll have to double check that because I don't want to get that wrong. But yeah, I mean, Aiden Fink has looked good, I think, when I've seen him. And would I draft him this year? I would need to watch him a lot more to be sure. Oh, Penn State's in the Big Ten, so that's a difficult conference. And they have not been great. But yeah, he's been good. And I feel like a second go around probably will result in him getting a draft pick. Like, if a couple of scouts are like, yeah, we should take a flyer on him and it's the 4th or 5th round, like, yeah, why not? Give it a go, because it's not empty calories, but I don't think it's quite like as astounding as the point totals indicate. What are your thoughts on the overall talent level of the 2024 draft compared to previous years? I mean, I kind of go over it in the write-up that's coming out, but it's kind of hard. Like, I think that there's a lot of really scary players if you're drafting really high in the draft. Like, I think there's a lot of guys like I did a game of Salayev last night. I did a game of Levshinov not too long ago. And seeing those guys 2-3 on Bob's list, I'm sort of sitting there going, I get it. I see why. I see why NHL teams would want to do that. But I will never understand, just how much people are willing to bet on players rounding their games out and improving, like to fix issues that are there. Because a top 3 pick to me should be as close to a slam dunk as you can get, right? Like there should be zero chance of failure with those picks. Like, you do not want to draft a guy second overall who turns out to be just okay or not really super useful, right? Like it hamstrings your team, or at least makes life more difficult. And I think with those guys, you're betting a lot. I think there's a lot of players that are, guys I would probably be a bit afraid of drafting really high. Guys like Zane Parik, he's scoring a lot of points, but he kind of spooks me. And so I think that the 2024 draft, there's more of that. But I do think, I don't like categorizing drafts as like good or bad before they happen. But I do think this draft has a lot of interesting players in the sense that like there are players that are good at some stuff. They're very useful in some situations, but they just need to figure it out here. Or they have a lot of skill, but you just need them to use it more. They have a lot of X, but you don't see it a lot. And there's a lot of those guys, I think, this year. Like there's a lot of guys who, if things break right, could be pretty good players that you could get later than you would think. But in terms of like the way what I would say is that I gauge what I feel about a draft based on how many players or how many times I'm watching a player and I'm going, oh wow, that was cool. Oh wow. And then I sit back after a game and go, wow, that was a great game. That guy was fantastic. And those are the ones who sort of go to the top of my board. And this year, there's only 4 of those. And that would be Celebrini, Catton, Lindstrom, and Demidov. And even Demidov is pushing it because the KHL game I did of him was really bad. But seeing him in the junior level, you're kind of going, okay, this guy is special, but he just hasn't, it's not there yet. But you still leave those games going, holy crap, what a guy. The rest of them to me are question marks, guys with question marks that are big enough that it might really limit their NHL potential. But there's a lot of those guys, like a lot of them. Like my 4th tier stretches from 22 to 51. So there's just a ton of guys in that sort of meat area just outside the really interesting players that have all kinds of different skill sets and upside and potential and everything. So I don't know if I would say like it's similar to like 2021, I guess is kind of what I'm saying, is like where there's a lot of guys who are neat and interesting, a couple of guys who are very impressive, but a lot of them have some issues here and there. You AJ, I know you love your Logan Stankoven. He was a guy who he's a guy who I had in like the 10 to 15 range. And I think there's a guy like a Stankoven here in an Andrew Basha, who is a bit undersized, but rambunctious and underratedly, interested in playing defensively. But the pace and the skill he's got and the creativity and his ability to score and set up plays is great. And he's on pace for 100 points this year, but he's ranked as if he's going to be a late first-round draft pick, if not a second round. Like I like Basha more than I liked Crystal from last year, Andrew Crystal, for example. And he's in my top 10, but there's a lot of guys like that where if NHL teams just do what they've normally done, guys like that will slip. And if you get a lot of late firsts or early second round picks, you could look like a genius.
Yeah. To me, based on what I've seen and heard about this class, it just feels like it's not 2023. 2023 was very special. And it'll be one of those draft classes potentially that we look at and go, wow, we're comparing that to 2015. We're comparing that to 2003.
Right.
Like in terms of the talent that's going to come in through that draft.
Right.
This is more like a normal draft, more like a 2021, a 2022, right? A 20,
yeah.
What? Like what's a normal draft? Like a 2017? Is that a normal draft?
Sure. Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, like it's a normal draft, and I think there's gonna be guys drafted pretty high who don't really work out the way people think they are, and I think there are guys who are going to be drafted later who show up more than you would expect, right? Like I, I don't know how many players are going to play in the NHL. I don't think anybody knows that, but we'll see. It's an interesting year. I find it more interesting than bad. A lot of people I've seen are like, it's not a good year. It's not this. It's bad. It's bad. I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting players, but not a whole lot of like, holy crap, like this guy's going to be lights out.
And it's probably a bit of recency bias too, because 2023 was just special, right? Like you're not going to get god tier years all the time.
Yeah, no, it's not
always
good
players.
Even last
to be
year,
had, just doesn't necessarily mean that the overall crop is going to be fantastic.
Yeah. If Macklin Celebrini was a 2023 eligible, where would you have him ranked versus last year's draft? I feel like I get this question like every 2 weeks.
You do.
Yeah, he'd probably be at number 5.
And you give.
I think I'm pretty
answer.
sure, but yeah, it's the same answer. Bedard, he's behind Bedard, Carlson, Fantilli, and Michkov for me. But do I like him more than Will Smith? Yes. Do I like him more than Reinbacher? Yes. Simashev? Yes. Leonard? Yes. All those guys? Yes.
Oliver Moore. Because that's who you had at 5.
Right. Yeah. Wait. Was it? Yeah. So I'd say he and Oliver Moore would probably be similar. Like I think Oliver Moore is a faster guy, but I feel like the smarts that Celebrini has and his sort of approach to the game maybe puts him a smidge ahead, but they're close to me. But yeah, Celebrini probably would be 5 on last year's. Regardless of the draft position, who have been the most fun guys to watch in 24, good and bad? Ooh, interesting. Most fun?
Whoever plays
I'd
the
say,
most like Evan Bouchard, probably, because you love Evan Bouchard.
Yeah. Artyom Levshinov has been fun for like both good and bad reasons. He's a lot of fun to watch. You can't deny that. He's interesting to watch. Same thing with Jesse Pulkkinen, is a guy who is terrifying, but also kind of interesting. I have a lot of fun, definitely a lot of fun watching Caden Lindstrom and Andrew Basha with the Medicine Hat Tigers. They both are great on that team. Trevor Connolly has moments where I'm like, yeah, this guy's a lot of fun. He's a good one. I have a lot of fun also watching Liam Greentree, because there's about 7 or 8 times in a game where I'm going, how in the name of God are you going to make anything happen out of this? And you're like, oh, okay, then he scores. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I have a lot of fun also watching. This is a guy that I'm pulling deep on, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong about him, but Tobias Heinonen in Finland, a guy who doesn't have a ton of points in Liga, so let's get that out of the way. But I love watching him play. Like, he's a hard-nosed guy, plays hard, skates hard, is, I think, getting better at managing the puck. That was, I think, a weakness of his game early in the year, but I think he's getting better at it at that level. A lot of his track data for me is very much comparable to Konsta Helenius. So he's another one I'd throw out there. Teddy Stiga is a fun one to watch. Who else? I don't know if there's anyone who's like fun because I don't like them.
Did you mention
Charlie
Demidov?
Ellick is fun. Yeah, Demidov is extremely fun to watch, but also frustrating, but he's a ton of fun to watch. That's probably a good selection of guys. Like there's a selection, there's a handful. It's fun watching Charlie Ellick hit guys, but sometimes he misses and it doesn't look good. I'd throw Kuzma Voronin out there as a deep cut. He's a USHL Youngstown guy, Russian player who's been playing in the States for a few years. I just really have liked him. Like, he's a great skater, really physical. You wouldn't expect it, but he can throw his weight around. But he is somewhat small. But I just think, like, again, I see him in a similar light to like Kenta Isa guy, where it's like he's not getting a ton of minutes now, but he's scoring pretty well for the minutes he does get. And I feel like over the years, as he gets more and more ice time and more responsibility, he'll just keep getting better and better and better. And I feel like at the end of the day, you could be, if you were a WHL player in 2 years, just like Kenta Isa guy, could he be 100-point guy? I could see it. So I'm a fan of him too. If we're talking fun factor, does someone take a late round flyer on Jack Musa? I'm making sure that that's not a trap name. but I don't think it is because I've been
insiders, brother.
Yes, exactly. Yes, Jack Musa is a real person, so that's good. Can't say I've seen Jack Musa play, but yeah, I mean, a point a game 20-year-old, he'll be 21 soon after the draft. That's always a tough sell, but I've never seen him play, so I can't say no. So I'll have a look. I'll have a look because could be interesting. But also, actually, I don't think he's eligible. I don't think you can draft American NCAA players if they're in their last year of eligibility. I don't think you can. Like, you can't draft. I'll have to double check the CBA, but I'm pretty sure that 03s that play in the NCAA and are North American are not eligible. Europeans are, like the goalie that Pittsburgh drafted, Lindbergh, I think. I think he was eligible because he was European, but I could be wrong. But I'll have a look regardless. Interested in your thoughts on the second tier of forwards for 2024. Hellenius, Brandsteg, Newgard, Iginla, Greentree, and Connolly. Are there big differences in what their NHL projection could be, and how would you rank them? So right off the bat, I can tell you my ranking for them would be Brandsteg, Newgard, Connolly, Greentree, Iginla, Hellenius, I think is what I have. I could be wrong, but definitely Brandsteg, Newgard, and Connolly are 1-2 for me, and then Greentree and Iginla are pretty close, and Hellenius is a little bit further behind. Hellenius is a guy where, similar to previous players like Joachim Kamel and everything, I just think the valuation is too high. I think it's too much for what he is, and I think he's gonna be more. Yeah, I have him in the late first round, and I know that I'm not the only hockey person that has that. At least percolating in their mind, maybe not that late, but certainly not a top 10 or top 5 guy. Brandsteg, Newgard, he might not have the points, but he has been scoring more recently. But I think he's very projectable to the NHL, like a physical, high intensity north-south guy with a bit of skill, good shot as well. I think he has a nice platform to work on and build. And I think there's a little bit more certainty there with him as in terms of style of play and what you can get out of him. TJ Iginla, I mean, he is his father's son. He's a great shooter, pretty good playmaker as well, busts his tail every time he's on the ice. A really, really solid, interesting player who, is a little small, but not tremendously small, but, he's rambunctious. And I think if he just refines his game a little bit and sort of slows things down a little bit, like he seems to be sort of skating too fast for his own feet and trying to deke guys out before he has to, but he's been playing very, very well. And I think a mid first round pick is reasonable for him. Greentree is just, he needs to get quicker and he'll be great. I think he's just one of the better, you can't touch me players in terms of physically. He's just always finding ways around guys and making plays and pulling pucks around you, which I think is sort of a high level IQ thing. Trevor Connolly is also a lot of fun, just pretty big, but powerful skater, powerful skilled player, goes to the net. And he's just driven a lot of really good results for me when I've seen him. And he's another one I have queued up for this week that I'm going to take another look at now that the rankings are done. Who do you think are the best transition defensemen in the draft? Well, let me take a look at what the numbers say. But
because Will
off the top
of for himself.
No, I can't. I have to look at the work that I've done to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So yeah. Actually, there's not a ton. It's pretty rare for defensemen this year to be that. But let's just go here and do this. So yeah, Levshinov is up there, especially offensively. Zeev Buium, I think, is also very, very good going both directions. What else? Dominic Badinka has been very good. And Alphonse Frey in that area has been very, very good. But the best, like in terms of the best, just looking at these guys and giving it some thought, honestly, I think one of the smartest puck movers up the ice probably is Alphonse Frey or Marcus Kiersey in Quebec, playing for Charlottetown. but that also might just be because he's playing in Quebec and it might be a little easier. But the way he sort of juggles multiple options and changes direction and changes passing options, all that stuff, it's really good. It's really high end. So those guys I probably would throw out there. But other than that, like a lot of these guys moving the puck up the ice is a bit of an issue unless they're skating directly in a straight line, which is not super projectable to the NHL.
And that's a big difference from the 2021 class because there were a lot of guys who were heavy on the transition. Like I remember Simon Edvinsson watching clips of him and being like, well, what is he going to be? Because it was awesome at times, but it was also scary.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like all things considered, Zeev Buium might be right up there. I would say he's probably the guy that I would point out. If you wanted one name, is there any hope for a quick turnaround of the Columbus Blue Jackets? Well, AJ, what do you think?
They tried.
You haven't said much.
They tried, but I don't think so. Like they've got out of
this season, no.
Man. I think things are going to turn around. Just it's not going to be this year. And that's okay. They have Zach Werenski. They have guys coming in. They have Gavin Brindley, who we love. Right? Like, I find that you can't just make a quick turnaround a lot of the times. A lot of what happens, like you see with Vancouver as to why they're really doing as well as they are. One, Thatcher Demko was hurt. Like, his hip, I don't remember what exactly it was, but I know he had a hip injury. And for goalies, that can be really, really... Like, it can really derail their seasons. So Thatcher Demko had to deal with that for a little while. He's gotten back to what he was, at least health-wise, before that hip injury, and he's back to the god goaltender he was before last year, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's all about certain factors that just change the way seasons go. Like, for Vancouver, if they had Demko last year, honestly, they might have been a playoff team. Like, if Demko had been a god the full year, they could have snuck into the wild card. Very possible. But it's just like a lot of things broke through right this year. Like, I wouldn't be... Honestly, if Ottawa comes back next year and they improve their bottom end of the roster quite significantly, I wouldn't be surprised if Ottawa has, like, a good run where they're doing well in the Atlantic Division and maybe are like second for a little while, because a lot of what matters is having a good complete roster. And Columbus, like, it just hasn't worked out that way for them. Like, Patrick Laine has been out a lot.
Yep.
Because he's kind of a hospital in terms of how hurt he is.
Fragile.
Yeah, he's a fragile dude, and at least physically, right? Like, I think with them, they'll figure it out. They've got good pieces. Like Adam Fantilli is your guy for years to come. Zach Werenski is awesome. If Johnny Gaudreau can figure it out with Adam Fantilli, that'll rock. Patrick Laine will probably be in a more limited role, but still, if he can stay healthy, he's a good player. He's not a world beater, but he's a good player. And like, it can turn so fast because teams are not that far apart in the NHL. Like, we think of it as, oh, one team is just way better than the other. Like, Vegas is on 5 other levels than, like, the San Jose Sharks. But it's more like 4 or 3. Because that's how talented and deep the NHL is. And it takes time to get up tiers, but, like, Columbus could honestly be good in 2 years. And it wouldn't surprise me.
No, I think so as well. And I mean, the problem for me with the Blue Jackets is, like, you kind of touched on it, but they're the players that are there to be the leadership and core group in the future are the ones that are probably underperforming the most. Like Laine and Gaudreau, you know, like those are the guys that you were hoping would be taking the reins and shielding guys like Fantilli and Kent Johnson and all that stuff. And they would sort of say, yeah, like we'll be the leaders, like we'll be the guys going over the boards and scoring the points, and you guys can figure this out. But it just seems like none of that has happened, and they're just kind of fine, and it's just not enough. And I think that that's a little bit concerning, because I think you do need guys who, are performing well, right? Like, you're a Leaf guy. Imagine if the Leafs were going into a rebuild with Marner and Matthews and Nylander, but Morgan Riley and Nazem Kadri and James Van Riemsdyk were all playing like crap going into adding those guys to the roster. Like, the Leafs probably wouldn't have been a playoff team in that Washington series if that was the case.
Like,
so
I don't believe in full rebuilds. I just think they're dumb.
No.
Like,
Yeah,
why would you institute a culture of losing for a shot at a particularly good player?
Well, that's the whole thing.
You can do well in the draft without having to crap your pants in the standings. Actually, that's what
true.
I don't understand. I don't understand why teams actively screw themselves by I understand getting rid of guys who are on expiring deals, but why would you sell your young players if they just don't fit your timeline, or even your good players if they don't fit your timeline? Unless you're getting a crap load back, why? You need to. I think you need to remain competitive, because otherwise you end up like the Buffalo Sabres, who haven't made the playoffs in how many years now? I think I was 12 years old the last time the Buffalo Sabres made the playoffs.
Right.
And I'm 23.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. You can't go through a period of time like that. You see how depressed those people are, their fans? And look at what's happening now.
Yeah. Like, you can't... it's so easy. Like, they say this all the time these days about a guy like Kent Hughes, right? It's like the easy part is destroying your team. Like, the fun part is trading everybody, right? Because you just want to get as much as you possibly can for the guys that everybody else wants. It's open season, so great. Like, that's the fun part. But being a team that starts to lose a lot and trying to start to win, that's not an easy thing to do, especially if you are not necessarily making the best decisions bringing those younger players along, right? Like, I don't really understand. I mean, I get it, I guess, because Ken Johnson has been very good since coming back from the AHL, but it felt like they were putting him in the doghouse right away at the beginning of the year. And it's like, is that how you get through to a early 20-something highly skilled guy who has some flaws in his game? Like, maybe, and I guess it worked, but also, like, maybe supporting him and like just kind of trusting the process for a little bit might also have worked. So I think Columbus is in a good position on paper to improve, but this is the hard part, right? Like, getting yourselves out of the basement and into the playoff period, into playoff contention. It's the tough part, because also the teams at the top are usually trying not to get worse. So over the years, you're trying to battle up against people who are already good and avoiding getting worse, right? Like, the Leafs haven't really gotten quote unquote worse. Like, they're on paper, like, they're not on pace for 120 points, but they're a team that continues to find guys that make it work, and they have that core group that's already entrenched, and there's a bunch of teams that are like that. So it's difficult to break through that. So yeah, like you said, like a full rebuild. I mean, think of how many times in the NHL draft it's like this guy who's available at 17 and got drafted at 40 or 35. It's like a playoff contender, like Winnipeg drafted Brad Lambert. A playoff contender has that guy not even in the NHL.
Logan Stankoven was a second-round pick.
Yeah,
Nikita Kucherov was a second-round pick. Braden Point was a third-round pick.
Yeah, if you do your homework, you're going to be okay. Like, you just got to, like, the draft often drops off very, very quickly past the first couple of picks. So a team drafting at 14 that may or may not know what they're doing versus a team drafting at 50 knowing what they're doing and playing their cards right are going to come out roughly equal. So you may as well at least try to win all the time, because at least that's my opinion. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like you said, trying to lose makes no sense, but I don't know if that's what Columbus is doing this season. But yeah, it's been tough.
They brought in Eric Gabranson, even though
that's them trying to lose for sure. Yeah, he's oof. Anyway, next question.
We got a super
What's
chat,
up with-
so I think we should go to.
Oh, do we?
first.
Okay,
sir.
yes. Oh, hello. Thank you very much. Yeah, Wilson is a good name to call me. I'll take it. Especially an Australian calling me Wilson. Super important question. What do you think is the best era of music? Oh, shit. Oh, I swore. That was such a good question. I swore.
Thanks, Sam. Good job. Swearing.
Yeah. I'm trying not to use my colored glasses. Okay, here's my answer.
Your blue
Here's my
colored
answer.
glasses, Will.
Yeah, my pastel colored glasses. Honestly, I think right now is the best era of music because there is literally everything now. It's like, obviously, if you go to TV or magazines or whatever for what's popular, and that's the state of music, I don't think that the world of music right now is particularly interesting. You know, like a lot of it is very formulaic and repetitive, but it also the pop charts and everything have been that way since I was born, right? Since the 80s, since the advent of MTV, whoever can manufacture the psychologically the best musical product is the one that ends up on the charts. And granted, there have been general shifts in how things go, right? Like the glitz and glamour of the 80s was replaced with grunge in the 90s, and the grunge of the 90s was replaced with the boy bands of the late 90s and the pop stars of the early 2000s. And then in the 2000s, you went from that to like back to sort of like a garage rock style of like mid to late 2000s of music. But then and then you kind of get into this, like the popular music now, and it's been this way for a while to me. In the summer, it's everybody's happy, and outside the summer, everybody's depressed. Like that's basically it. But the good thing about now is that if you want a great modern metal band, like Sleep Token is a great example of a modern metal band that is creative and unique and something like you've never heard before, right? There's tons of that. There's a French psychedelic punk rock band called Slift that I love. They have a new album coming out in a couple of weeks, and I've already pre-ordered it, and like they're awesome. Like it's this thing where it's like sometimes the bands that are good are the ones that just continue to make good stuff and no one really cares for a while, and then eventually they sort of, you know, become nostalgic. So I think, you know, one thing I do like about music from when I was younger is the very popular stuff, at least here in Canada, was often very musical, right? Like it was very musical and not necessarily very formulaic, you know, or very straightforward in terms of here's the chord progression and here's the music. It follows the pattern of what people like, but it's like here's a person who knows how to like compose and arrange, or works with writers who know how to throw a curveball at you musically speaking, right? There are lots and lots of you know, again, nostalgia is extraordinarily powerful, right? Like you don't realize how much better things are in a lot of ways when you're an adult compared to what you remember when you're a kid and everything's new. Like that's just a psychological bias that everybody has, every single person, right? And if you're AJ's age, if you're in your early 20s and you think I'm going to be cool when I'm 30, I'm going to know everything about what's going on, and
cool, and I'm
and everything,
so it doesn't matter.
but you know what I mean? Like the general thought of like, you know, I'm not going to be like my crotchety dad when I'm 40. It's like, trust me, I'm 33. I have to fight that away like once every 2 weeks. Something I see or something I hear, I go, what is this? Like, what is this? And then I go, no, this is just when I was a kid, dumb stuff happened. People complain about the way teenagers behave now. Trust me, teenagers have always been a pain. That's just the way it is, right? The kids aren't getting worse. You're just getting older and wiser. That's just what's happening. Like it's
broadcast more. That's
yes, and it's broadcast more.
You get to see stupid in front of your face 24/7.
Yeah, like someone drunk driving into a Walmart in 1989, no one's going to know in New York if it happens in Alberta, right? But if it happens in Alberta in 2024, the whole world is going to know about it. So everyone's probably going to go, oh my goodness, like, why are so many people getting drunk and driving into Walmarts all of a sudden? It's like, no, it's just that stuff was a byline in a newspaper, a local newspaper 30 years ago, but now it's all over the place because people love to see that stuff. So I think music, you can say something very similar where I don't care if you think it's horrendous, by the way. It's a good take. I think it's a good take. Like the fact that there's just a ton of music out there to experience that runs all, like, again, if you love Led Zeppelin, what's that band that basically is Led Zeppelin, but in the 2020s? They basically are Led Zeppelin. Like if you want a band that sounds exactly like a band that you think was the best band ever 50 years ago, they exist too.
That I think stole all their stuff from other people.
Right, exactly. And Led Zeppelin also stole their music from a lot of people, usually black people, which, we can get into that another time. But in terms of nowadays with music, I think it's the best time in the world to be a musician and also to just listen to music. Like there's everything, and Spotify radio on its own is like the most incredible musical invention in a long time, because it's like it tailors, like you always say, the songs on the radio all sound the same. Well, go to Spotify and hit the radio button. You're going to hear a bunch of stuff you've probably never heard before, like that. It's just the way it is. So especially being someone who knows a lot about the music industry, it's, if you look and put in a little bit of effort, like you did when you were a kid, ideally, to find music that you liked, it's there, right? And there's a lot of it out there, and people are just constantly putting out more and more. So that's my answer. That nowadays is the best era of music that I have ever experienced, at least in my life, because I also was not around for the 80s.
Mine is that they're all good in different ways, and you find value in all of them. Like, there's good stuff from every time. Whether or not there's a level of stuff that you consider bad more so than you consider good now, okay. But you can still listen to the stuff from whenever, right? Like, I love listening to classical music even. That's how much of a loser I am. But that's because I grew up training my voice a lot. Like, I was a singer, so
right.
I been exposed to a lot of music for a long time. So
the other thing too to keep in mind, and then we'll move on, but the thing about popular music, not pop. I'm not saying like the thing about Taylor Swift. The thing about popular music throughout time is that it is often very reflective of like society in general, like what is popular, because it becomes popular for a reason, right? Like it's not like MTV just goes, this band is going to be the band that we make popular. Like they're going to play what people are asking, or at least that's what they used to do, right? And so when you look back in the eras of music, right, like the 50s were kind of the start of like popular music being like a marketable, thing. People were flocking to Elvis Presley because he was doing what he did on camera for the first time ever. No one had ever seen anyone like that before. Same thing with the Beatles. They were a band from across the ocean. I didn't even know they had music in Liverpool, England. And they're writing these catchy, again, rip-off music of other bands, but, still. And then, but from there, music becomes very much of like a political tool, right? Like you had the Vietnam War, so much popular music that sticks to this day in rock music, especially, is related to the Vietnam War in some way. Or in the 70s, it was like the whole hippie revolution and the whole folk music revolution, where you have like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and like all these. It's a person and an acoustic guitar music, right? And all this very sort of different kind of vibe. But then the 80s come along, and it's very like everything's, we're spending money and everything's frivolous, and we're loosening up the economy so everybody can spend and it's going to be awesome and everybody has money now. So there's this like high tech revolution of music that becomes, in some ways, some people find it corny in retrospect. I personally love 80s music aesthetic, the awful sounding digital music recording.
Yes.
And the 90s were a backhand to that, right? Like Nirvana came out and were like a middle finger to that whole world, right? And it caught on. and it just kept going and going from there. And then things kind of changed from there. So it's always very sort of linked to, you know, like the late 90s were a very optimistic time. Things were changing in the world for the better. And so the music became a lot more fluffy and manufactured and sort of scratching that itch for people. You know, it all sort of fluctuates with the times too. So it's again, like people in today's age evaluating things without having been there, right? It's complicated. But for me, I just see it as like, this is an amazing time, just to be alive. Like, it's just an amazing time to be alive, as much as people say it sucks. Let's get through this, because that was a great question. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, what's with Tanner Howe? I've seen Brendan Gallagher comparisons. Does he have that dog? How's his pace? Would you say he's having a disappointing season? I don't think he's having a disappointing season, because he's about the only good player Regina has. But I don't think he's Brendan Gallagher. I don't know if I would draft him before he's gone. Like, I imagine he's gone in the first 3 rounds, and there's probably going to be players I'm more interested in. I just feel like, you know, he plays relatively hard. He does have a bit of a physical edge, but he's not super quick. He's skilled, but I don't think he's like that skilled. Like, I see him as a little bit more of a more aggressive Connor McLennan, if you remember who that is. Like, he'll back check a little bit more and make space a little bit better. Skill level is good, but not great. Like, he's fine. But I also didn't think Tanner Howe was like completely changing my mind last night. Can you get a rundown of Tenny Steegett? Yeah, he's typical Will Scouch pick. Undersized, but tremendously aggressive, really creative offensively, can make a play, can shoot, but he's small, but plays bigger than he is, so people might get scared of him being an NHL player. What else is going on? A second team in St. Louis, so Toronto can trade Nick Robertson there.
No.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you remember the last time an overage player was drafted in the first round? I think that was Brett Leeson. I think Brett Leeson was a 20-year-old drafted in the first round, which was not an advisable decision.
Because there was Chinnikov.
Chinnikov as well. Yeah, he was one.
He was in 2020. Yeah. Like, maybe the Columbus Blue Jackets will take Maverick Bourque. No.
Nope. And now Chinnikov is, what, a 20-point-a-season guy now? 25? Something like that. Thoughts on Dmitry Voronkov's rookie season? I've really liked Dmitry Voronkov. You know, he's been, I think, in the top-ish echelon of rookies this year. Like, he's a lanky, kind of big, but skilled guy who just plays a really solid game. And he catches my eye a bunch of times. Him and Marchenko catch my eye a ton watching the Blue Jackets play. Ton of fun.
Yeah, they played an all-Russian line, I think.
Yeah.
All three of the guys we just mentioned, Chinnikov, Voronkov, and Marchenko. Like, I think they all played together at one point. They're a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Has Salayev done anything recently to warrant going top 5? If not, are we just stuck with the broken record analysts saying he's top tier because he's big and something Hedman? So yeah, the Hedman thing is a little ridiculous. I saw that and I thought that was nuts. Top 5, it's like if you're extremely optimistic about where he'll be in the future, I can't say it's a bad bet. He's gigantic and he skates really well for a gigantic guy, but I don't think the defensive mobility is there. I think gets beat in puck battles way more than you would want. He's an extremely limited offensive player. I know he has points in the KHL, but a bunch of them came in the first 2 weeks of the season, and they all came on the power play most of the time. And when you watch him play, he's making D-to-D passes. He's keeping his game very safe, which is what I remember of him last year. So you're betting on him being an extremely good skater all around, which he isn't now, but I'm certainly sure he could be. Improving on his skill level more than it is. I think it's better than it was early in the year. I can't say it would be a bad pick at top 5, but I think there's potential for it to not be in retrospect, if that makes sense. Any movement on Demidov after his recent play? No, I feel like Demidov is going to be locked in at 4 for me for the rest of the year. I just don't know who's going to challenge him. I could see him going much later in the draft, but I don't see him being lower on my list personally. Thoughts on Luca Morelli and Ben Danford? So Morelli, I'm not a huge fan of either Morelli this year in the draft, but I do like Ben Danford in a way. I think he's a relatively safe player. I think he'll play NHL games decently well, at least defensively. I don't know, like the guy we're talking about the Rangers earlier, the guy he kind of reminds me of maybe like a Ben Danford, or if you're a Jets fan, maybe Dylan Sandberg, I think is his name. Like those guys, he kind of reminds me of those guys when they were draft eligible. He might not be as fluid and mobile a skater as Ryan Lindgren can be to play like he does, as punishing and physical as he is. But Ben Danford has enough skill to make a first pass out of the zone. He's a decent mobile skater. He's really physical when he wants to be. And I thought he played last night. He played really well for what I was expecting. So I'll be watching another game of his before too long. Did you happen to catch any of Olin Zellweger's NHL debut? What did you think about him? I did. I mean, they basically were giving him, they were dipping his toe in the pool, I think. He was deployed, I think, very offensively, which you should with him, especially to get going. He had a couple of chances. He got a point. He had a couple of chances to get more. You saw the ability of him to move laterally and walk the offensive blue line and try to open lanes, and that's kind of what he does super well. I don't think he played enough for me to really have like a good take, and even one game, if he played 20 minutes, is probably not enough. But I thought he played well. Like he had a good start in his career. He's been great in the AHL. And I remain optimistic. He didn't look out of place at all. I don't think it's just, I don't think he was tested as much as he could have been, but that's totally okay.
Yeah. And similar thoughts to Will on Olin Zellweger. It's just, I want to see more. Him, yeah. I want to see more. That's all. Like, he looks good, but let's see a bigger sample. And I'm rooting for him. So hopefully he does well, but also don't get your hopes up that you're just gonna draft Celebrini guy. I see the whole comment about you're also excited to pick him up.
Yep.
Look, man. Yep. Never bank on anything in terms of like where you're gonna get guys.
Yep.
Because the draft lottery is a lottery for a reason.
Yep.
Most people don't win.
Even the teams that win sometimes don't win. At the end of the day.
I wonder who you're referencing, Will.
I don't know. Who could it be?
Couldn't be Yuri Slafkovsky at number 1.
I didn't say that. I did not say that. But there are many examples you can draw from. Maybe the Oilers with Neil Yakupov, perhaps.
Hey, man, I appreciate that you can feel it in your bones with that, but man, I thought the Leafs were going to win the Cup this year, and it did not happen, so...
Hey, it's not over. Anything's possible. AJ, we got a question directed at you. What's your favorite hymn?
Oh, I don't have one. I never this is the thing. I just don't have favorites except for one, like there's one song I really love. My favorite song predates me by quite a bit. It's George Michael's Careless Whisper. I just love that song. The saxophone.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That's my favorite one, man. That's absolutely my favorite
That's not
song.
A bad choice. It's not a bad choice.
I love it. I sang it as like my final. I sang it at school, like as my final project, because we did like a vocal night. Because I was in a school like vocal program, and that was the song I chose, and it went really well.
Who hurt your feelings?
Oh, what do you mean? Who hurt my feelings? Oh,
isn't that song the sad, like super sad and?
Yeah, that's actually you're right.
Never gonna dance again. Anyway,
I'll tell you after, Will.
All right, fair enough. Ray asks, "Do you know what new jazz is?" Probably. I don't know about labels, but I listen to jazz music that has come out recently. There's all kinds of really cool, sort of funky jazz bands that are new and fun. When are Edvinsson, Casper, and Danielson going to be full-time Red Wings? Never, because they stink.
When they're good enough.
When they're good enough, yeah. No. I would give Danielson a bit of a runway. Edvinsson maybe next year. Casper maybe next year or the year after.
Yeah.
I just haven't been blown away ever with Casper and Danielson. And playing in the NHL is really hard. But Edvinsson I could see next year.
Yeah, he'll be fun.
Yep.
Good transitional guy. Like
yep.
We were talking about it earlier. There were times in his draft year where he really scared me with the puck. But he was just so smooth. even
Yeah.
through all the scariness. So smooth.
Yeah.
So like I'm really rooting for Simon Edmondson. I think he's gonna be a decent thing. Top 4 guy, like a top 4 defenseman. Because most guys are not number ones. That is just the sad reality that most guys are not number 1 defensemen.
Right.
There's not even 32 number 1 defensemen. Which is what's so funny.
Yep.
That I like that we'd actually consider of number 1 quality.
Yeah. Weird. Okay. I guess there's one last one. Or I don't know if this is the question or not, but your favorite song? ? Or if that's just responding to your response.
It's a response to me. It
Yeah.
might be the craziest answer I've ever heard. Yeah. No, that's
Right.
fair. I just love
Gotcha.
that song.
Mm-hmm. Ever heard of new metal? Hi, Mikhail.
Mikhail always shows up right at
Bro.
the end.
Limp Bizkit is my favorite band ever. That's the other thing too about music too, is like there's always lots and lots of different kinds of music. Like if you ask what one person thought was super popular in 2002 and another person, they will say probably completely different things because of what they were listening to, right? Like they probably go,
I was
oh
1
man,
years old.
Korn. Yeah, I know. But like they might go, Korn was the biggest band in the world. It's like,
What the hell?
well,
is
yeah,
that?
they were bro, you don't know Korn?
No.
Oh boy. You should go listen to some Korn.
Well, my mother also controlled the music in our house, so anything
Oh.
she didn't like, she'd just
Yeah, your
change.
mother probably would not like Korn. They had a few big ones. They were a fun one.
So I heard a lot of Hot in Here when I was a kid.
They did a lot of wait,
Like
your mom played Hot in Her but not Korn?
yeah.
Oof, boy. You poor child.
What? Wait.
There's so much more to life.
Why am I getting flamed? What do you mean this
Because
is just brutal. I'm 23 years old, man. Like, what the hell? I don't have.
yeah,
anything
it's forgivable. It's forgivable. This was when I was a 12-year-old. Like this was
Yeah.
the stuff that my friends were listening to in
I-
school. It's like, oh, I love Slipknot, bro. You ever heard of Slipknot?
No, I still have time to regret that I'm old.
Right.
Not quite there yet.
Yeah, but
oh, but the person who's saying this is 21. Awesome.
Korn is a good adventure. They're a fun time. Their singer goes all the time, and it's great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can
Anyway.
tell my mother wouldn't like that.
Yeah, no, your mother wouldn't like it at all. Yeah, them with like Limp Bizkit mixed in, and good times. Papa Roach, Godsmack. The early 2000s were crazy. Anyway, if you like, we can continue discussing musical matters in the Discord channel for Scouching if you join the site. But anyway, that's going to be it for today. We're going to do a final ad read before we take off. So we are brought to you by Fanatics. You can click our affiliate link in the description or scan the QR code, and it provides a small kickback to the show on anything you buy. You can also support us and Sam through Puck Preps with your NCAA prospect needs over there. We cover the 06s. If you're not on the site, you can join by just going to scouching.ca, and any tier of subscription there gets you an invite to the server. And if you have any questions or issues, you can DM me on Twitter and I'll give you a hand. But there's a form you fill out and it'll automatically invite you to the server. We're also brought to you by Fractal Hockey Consulting, which is my business for hand track player analysis and recruitment packages for Europe and the NCAA and beyond. If you need help, we can give you something. Or you could subscribe at Scouching.ca. You can subscribe there for exclusive access to innovative data tools, providing tons and tons of insights into draft prospects and players making their mark in the NHL. I should also note that there is a QR code to go straight to Scouching.ca in the draft or in the window of the stream. So that should do it for today. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us, and thank you very much, Mr. AJ Producer Boy. For all of your assistance, and give me the line. Say it. Yep, there it is. Thank you very much.
Job.
Yep, beautiful. Job. So yeah, that'll be it for today. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Monday for a draft ranking special. I'm not sure if Sam will be back. I think he comes back this weekend, but I'm not sure if he is going to want to work on Monday, first day back. So yeah, we'll figure that out. And I think we might have a special surprise for next Thursday's show, which we're still working on, but maybe you want to pencil that one in for one you might not want to miss. So thank you very much, of course, to all of you and AJ, job. But this was a good time, and we'll see you on Monday night. Toodles.